Hey, what's going on YouTube? Today we're going to be talking about how you can improve your jazz progressions. I'm going to split the video off into 3 different sections. So it's going to start out with kind of just a beginner crash course on just 2-5-1s and very basic stuff, and then I'll go into intermediate on how you can kind of expand on those ideas, and advanced I'm going to be talking about some modular interchange. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put some timestamps for you guys so you can just skip over to whatever level you think you would benefit from best, and yeah, let's get right into it.
Let's get straight to it.
One of the core pillars of jazz progressions is something called a 2-5-1. So basically what a 2-5-1 is let's say we're playing in the key of C major. So it's just all white notes. So what 2-5-1 is telling us is we're playing the 2nd chord of the C major scale, the 5th chord of the C major scale, and the 1st chord of the C major scale. The reason this is such a basic and such a founding pillar of jazz music, it uses something called the circle of fifths, and I'm not gonna get into all that right now. It gets a little complicated. I could do another video on that alone if you guys want, but for right now all we're gonna worry about is just that 2-5-1 is one of the most common chord progressions, not even in jazz in general, just like any music. I can guarantee you, if you went up on the top charts and looked up whatever song by Taylor Swift or any of your favorite artists, I'm sure at least one of them is going to be a 2-5-1. I'm betting $100 on it. So we start out with the D minor, go up to G major, and resolve at what's called a tonic. It's kind of like the home chord, C major, because we're in the key of C major. So C major is our kind of like our home, like our base. So how do we make this more jazzy? Well, what you could do is turn this D minor into a D minor 7. So we're just adding that 7th on top. And then when we go up to the G major, you make it a G7. Not a G major 7, a G7. So this adds tension. So what this is doing is, let me write it in for you guys. So we start out with the D minor, and then we'll go up to G major, and now we'll go down to C major. So this is a 2-5-1 in its most basic form. We got 2nd note, 5th note, and 1st note, okay? And we just built chords off of that. For this beginner level, I'm not really gonna get too much into the theory for you guys, because I'm gonna assume that whoever's watching this is not too well versed in theory, and that's perfectly fine. I know a ton of really talented producers that hardly even know their scales. I'm not knocking anyone that doesn't really know their theory. This is just gonna be intended to kind of help you guys out and kind of give you guys kind of a guide. So we have D, F, A, and this makes up our D minor chord. What you want to do when you're making a jazz chord is you're going to want to skip the next note in the scale, which happens to be B, and then place a note on the next note. So what we do here is skip a note, place a note, skip a note, place a note. So let's say, for example, I wanted to build a chord off of F, okay? So since I have the scale highlighted, I can see that G is the next note in the scale. I'll skip that and then place a note on A, which is the next note after G. And then so on, we'll skip B and place a note on C. There we go. And we have our F major triad. So what we can do to make this jazzier is we can just keep doing this skip a note, add a note method. So we go off of A, our next note is B, and we'll place a note on C. Let's go over here to our G chord. We ended off on D. So we're going to skip E and land on F, because that's the next highlighted note in the scale. And now we're going to go over to our last chord, C major. G, skip a note, B. So this should make our chords sound a lot more jazzy. Really, if you just basically like dumb it down, jazz chords, there's a lot of extra notes. There's a lot of extra flavor that gives these chords more character instead of just a regular triad. We're adding a lot more notes, a lot more feeling to it. So now let's listen to what we have. It sounds really good. The next step that I would add to this is we might as well just keep adding notes. Might as well. So we'll go off of the C, skip the D, add an E. F, skip G, add an A. B, skip C, and then we get to D. So this is a really good chord progression. I might delete this A note. I'm just not really feeling it. This is a jazz chord progression. This is a 2-5-1. This is a basis for 90% of Western music. And of course you can always take a note, because this F, we can just bring it down an octave. It's the same note, it's the same chord. But we can just bring it down an octave and it has a bit more of a different sound. This is called voice leading. Notice how between these chords, only 2 notes are changing. These notes are all the complete same. This adds kind of like a smooth transition between the chords. And we don't have to just stop at a 2-5-1. We can make whatever chord progression we really want. Let's pick a random note. Let's start off on F. We'll skip G, add A. The next note is B. Skip it and add a C. And let's just keep doing this. Let's keep going. Now it will get to a certain point where you will want to stop adding notes, because otherwise you'll end up with something like this. Which I guess could be useful if you want to add a lot of tension, but if you're a beginner, I would really refrain from it. At the most, I would add 7 notes. This is what you would call a major 13th. But you don't have to know about any of all that. You just have to know the formula for building these chords in FL Studio. And then shoot, we can just go down to E. We go down to E, skip F, go to G, just stick with our formula. And then we can end it off on a 2-5-1 maybe. A 2-5-1 is a really great way to kind of bring yourself back to home. Think of the chord progression kind of like a journey. C is our home, and this F is kind of far away from our home. And when we go here with F major, this E minor chord, if we want to resolve it, we're going to want to head back home. And so the best path back home is a 2-5-1. So far we have a 4, because F is the 4th note, E, because it's the 3rd note, so it's a 4-3, and then 2-5-1. 4-3, 2-5-1. It sounds complicated, but it's really just the number note in the scale. And then from here we'll go 2-5-1 to take us back home. It'll make us feel a lot more resolved, and it'll make it feel a lot more complete. So this is a 2, 5, and then we'll end it here with our C major chord. Gonna invert some of these notes and make because if you look at this jump between this top note and this top note, that's a huge leap. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make these 2 notes just go up an octave. Look how much smoother that is. Look how much little space this note has to cover to get to this note. It's gonna make a lot smoother of a transition. So let's listen to the whole thing. And there you go. That's how you can make any chord progression jazzy. There's a little formula for you guys that don't know all of your music theory to kind of build off major 7, major 9th chords. Just kind of experiment. Jazz is all about finding new sounds, and it's all about kind of breaking the rules. So kind of just use this as just a basis. And once you start getting used to making these extended chords with a lot of flavor, don't be afraid to kind of move some notes around. Don't be afraid to kind of experiment. Because after experimenting a lot, you might be able to get something that sounds a little more fancy like this. Very subtle changes. I changed maybe what, like 3 notes? And it sounds a lot more classy, a lot more like push and pull with the tension, and it resolves really nicely with the C major chord. I really like it. And it's simple. We just kept skipping a note, adding a note, skipping a note, adding a note. When we wanted to go back home, we just did a quick 2, 5, 1. Sorry for my singing there. But yeah, that's going to be the beginner section. By the way, really quick, if you guys are curious, the VST that I'm using for these sounds is Labs. I really recommend it, especially if you're a beginner in production, or even if you've been producing for like years. It's a free VST, so there's no point in not getting it, and it's really like there's a lot of cool sounds that you can download, so I'm gonna uncheck download it only. So they have like I guess like a premium kind of like subscription thing of Labs Plus, but all these other ones that are free are completely available to use. And one of my favorite sounds that I like to use is the one I'm using right now, the soft piano. The soft piano is really good, especially for like lo-fi, that kind of stuff, jazzy chords. So yeah. Okay, so for the intermediate level, what I'm gonna do is kind of go over how we can spice things up a little bit from what I just talked about. So let's just take our 2-5-1 for example. Let's start out with a 2-5-1. So if you've been producing for a while, this might look not all that crazy to you. This might look like just a regular chord progression that you see on the daily. So if you're a pretty intermediate piano player or producer or whatever, you might not really think all too much of this. This just looks like your basic 2-5-1. Maybe a couple notes are inverted. We got a ninth right here, a bit of a cluster going on, but nothing too crazy. So how can we add more to this? How can we add kind of like some more classiness, some more spice? What we can do is we can actually start adding a little more tension. First off, let's just start with this G7 chord. G7 chords have like pretty much their whole purpose is to have tension. We have this tension here with the G7 and then released with the C major 7. So what we can do is add more tension, more color to this G7 chord. Let's add a ninth and let's add a 13th. We'll bring it down a bit so it's not such a crazy jump. Let's listen to what we got so far. Now this is already sounding pretty good, but what we can do is alter some of these notes. So what I can do is take this A, this ninth, and flatten it. So it's a flat 9. And what I can do with this E is I can also flatten it. And we can just experiment, see what that sounds like. It's got a very like distinct sort of sound to it. I'm going to bring these up an octave just so they're not as muddy. That's already sounding a lot better. Wow. Let's take a look at this D minor chord. Believe it or not, we can add some tension in this D minor chord. What we can do is flatten the 5th. This is really common. This is actually a borrowed chord from the C minor scale. This has a lot of tension in it. It's kind of like a diminished triad with the minor 7th on top. And what I just did was kind of just like took some notes and inverted them. Not really too complicated. And we can even add a ninth to this D minor flat 5. That sounds really good. I think also something we could improve is we have this kind of chromatic line going down. What if we ended it so it was going dun, so it was going dun, dun. That's really nice voice leading here. Voice leading is a little bit slept on in music production and composing in general. It's a lot easier on the ears when you have this very smooth transition between chords rather than jumping all over the place. So let's listen to what this sounds like. It's great. Alright, so for the final section, I'm just gonna go into a little bit more of modulation and kind of transitioning between keys. So this is gonna be for the advanced people that kind of pretty much know what they're doing. Maybe the intermediate section wasn't enough for them, and you skipped over here to this section of the video. So what we did in the last section, we kind of dipped our toes into it a little bit, is modular interchange. So this is a really just fancy term for going between keys. Instead of using only white notes like I did in the beginning, modular interchange is pretty much just a fancy way of saying going between keys. We're not just holding ourselves to the white notes here. Like I said, we kind of got into it a little bit here, especially with this D minor flat 5 chord. We are borrowing it from C minor. So we can actually expand on this idea. So let's start out with C major. We'll start out with an E minor 9. And then let's say I want to go to this F chord. Well, what I can do is borrow the C7 from the F major scale. So forget about the C major scale for a second. Think about this target chord that I want to get to. Now that sounds alright, but what I want is some tension and release. I want the listener to kind of be drawn in and feel that this F major is resolved. And you don't really get that with just an E minor to F major. So what I'm going to do is something called a secondary dominant. So what that is we look at this target chord that we want to land on. This is F sharp or F major, sorry. Just like in C major, how we have the G7 that really wants to pull us into home. This F major has the same thing, but in this key it's C because it's the 5th note of the F major scale. So we'll make even though we're technically in the key of C major, we're going to make a C7 so that it kind of draws us into this F major. What we're going to do is make this C7, even though we're in the key of C major technically, what we want to do is land on this F major chord. So what we're going to do is make the C7 so that it can tie in really nicely and make a smooth transition to this F major chord. See, now that sounds really nice. Even though technically C7 isn't part of the C major scale, this B flat or A sharp is not part of the C major scale, but it works because it adds some dissonance, some tension that releases to this F major. And we don't have to stop there. We can pick another note in C major. Let's have our target chord be D minor now. Alright, so I'm adding some space here for our tension chord. So we want to go E to F, and we have this transition. And now we want to go F to D, and we want to transition. So we'll do the same thing. D, F, A. I'm going to do the secondary dominant again, and we can add a flat 9 here. And let's listen to what that sounds like. And then from here, since we're on D, we're already at 2, we might as well finish it off with 5-1. So again, our target chord is C major. We'll make a G7. Now here I want to get a little fancy. So what we're going to do here is called a tritone sub. A tritone sub, it's short for tritone substitution. Don't let these fancy terminology scare you from this stuff. All this is doing is bringing our G7 down 6 semitones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, the theory about this is a little complicated. The reason this works is because we have this, if you take away the C sharp, what really makes this chord have tension is this tritone. Sounds very dissonant. This tritone also makes up a diminished chord. But what we know about diminished chords is if we took this top note and inverted it, it's still a diminished chord. It's still the same diminished chord technically. You could call it D diminished, you could call it F diminished, you could call it G sharp diminished. So what you could do is you take this diminished chord that you'll find in G major, G7, and you can bring it down an octave. So diminished chords and seventh chords are actually really closely interconnected, because if you look at this, if we add just a G right here and invert some of these notes, it's just a G. It's just a G9, G flat 9. But once you do this and delete the G, all of a sudden it looks like a diminished chord. So the reason I was able to just all of a sudden bring this down 6 semitones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is because it's the same F diminished chord that we would get if we were all the way up at G and inverted these notes. It's the same thing. So let's listen to what we have for our final product. So that's going to be about it for this tutorial. Hopefully it was of some help for you, and hopefully the quality's still doing all right. I'm still new to this tutorial stuff, and I'm trying my hardest to teach it and kind of explain things in a way that's easy to understand. So if you guys have any like critiques or like feedback to give me, like don't hesitate to just let me know in the comments. I won't take it personally. I want to make sure I'm making these videos so that they're actually helpful. And I want to make sure these videos are really helpful. I want to make sure I'm actually teaching useful things in a way that's easy to understand so that you guys can improve your producing. So yeah, that's going to be the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and yeah.